Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this surveyor information meeting for the last of three survey weekends for the 2025 Elegant Trogon surveys. This is for the Huachcuas Mountains survey, which is on Saturday, May 24th, and then the last survey of the season, which is Sunday, May 25th of the Chiricahuas Mountains. So this is a meeting for logistics and about the Trogon survey in general, as well as logistics for these two specific mountain ranges for the last Trogon survey. Okay, so yeah, I really appreciate everyone who's helping with these surveys. It's been kind of a crazy year so far doing the surveys. So we have completed three of the five. So second weekend of May, we did the Atascosa Highlands survey, which is kind of the smallest of the five ranges, the five important bird areas that we survey, but really an important one because some years it can have quite a few trogons, up to 15 to 20 in some years. This year we had one trogon in that survey. It was in Sycamore Canyon, kind of like the flagship canyon of the Atascosa Highlands. Um, and then we did the Patagonias and the Santa Ritas, and data is still rolling in, but count has been pretty low so far. It's been, I think we have fewer than five for the Patagonias and fewer than 10 for the Santa Ritas. Usually in the 30 range for each of those. Um, it's definitely pretty dry. If anyone's been out birding in any of these areas the last, month, you know how dry it is out there. And I know this can be a little, I didn't have any on my route in the Santa Rita's. First time ever that was a zero count route. It's usually a very good route. And it's been good. And I had fun and we saw lots of birds, but no trogons. And it is super important that we're documenting this. So every route I've assigned to people for these two surveys this coming weekend are all in a normal year would be extremely likely for having trogons. I'm not putting anybody on the sort of like marginal routes, the routes that like may have them in a good year type routes. So none of those are being done. It's all very likely routes this year. So really any of us could get trogons, but it's so hard to know where they're going to be. There have been more reports on eBird for the Huachcuas and Chiricahuas than the ones we've already done. So I think we'll have a higher count this coming weekend than we did the previous two weekends because these are mountains that can have a little more water in them in drier summers. So we'll see. It's very important, and I really appreciate everyone being really good sports to do these routes. And for the ones in the coming weekend, we may actually we have I think a better chance than the teams that did the previous weekend of getting trogons. And you just don't know which of these sort of very likely routes may have them. And I mean, some of us are going into areas that don't get birded that much, so it's not like eBird is necessarily capturing it accurately. And when they're not reported, I don't know if it's just because no one went in there or if they're not actually there. So this is great. And we've been doing these. It's really great that you guys are helping cover these. And we've been doing these counts for more than 10 years now. It's been since 2013. And already we're seeing data that trends very closely with rainfall. So and I think this year is going to be one of those years where it tracks really closely. And so it even adds more to the picture of really making it very clear to us that previous rainfall the year before has and into the winter before and summer before has a tremendous impact on how many trogons are around and where they're located. So anyway, I'll launch right into it, but I just wanted to sort of give that preamble. If you don't get trogons this coming weekend, that is not, do not feel bad because most people, I don't know, at least last weekend, most people didn't have them. We'll see how it shakes out in the Chiricahuas and the Huachcuas, but this is super important data that we're establishing. So I do appreciate all of your help. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get right into it. Um, okay, go. Okay. All right. So now everything looks a little bit different. Can someone unmute and tell me, can you guys see the screen okay?
Yes, I can see
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. So, the logistics for the Trogon survey, the basic idea is you've signed up for the survey, you've been assigned an area to survey. on this coming Saturday for the Huachcuas or Sunday for the Chiricahuas. And the hub of where all the info lives is this website. It's the Arizona Important Bird Areas website. This is a big project of the Arizona IBA program. It's one of our bigger surveys that we do all year. And this is in partnership with Arizona Game and Fish, Audubon Southwest, and of course, Tucson Bird Alliance. Oh, I need to change that. It says Tucson Audubon Society on the website. But this data is also shared with the Coronado National Forest. The whole survey pretty much happens on the Coronado and Fort Huachuca. And I've now been working with Fort Huachuca to share all the data with them as well. So that's for the Huachuca survey. So there's a lot of partners in this, and it's a real big survey effort. So I really appreciate all your help. But if you go to the aziba.org website, and this is kind of our hub here, but if you go to the tab here that is for survey resources, it goes to all these different surveys that we do throughout the year. So where I sort of put information for volunteers for all these different efforts. If you go down to the Trogon one down here, Elegant Trogon Surveys of Sky Islands in Southeast Arizona, it opens this tab, and this has a lot of great information about the survey in general. So this is where the sign up links were, just a little sort of like intro about why we do Trogon surveys. And then it's got some really good resources here, generally, which we'll talk about in a moment. But then it has these pages on the specific survey. So there's one, because each of the 5 Trogon surveys has a little bit sort of their own thing going on. So there's a specific page for each one. And then I have here a note about doing elegant Trogon surveys where many people on this meeting or watching the video will have already done one of these surveys, so sort of knows what they're getting into. But I do have a little review of what you're getting into and a little video about it where it's sort of like some of the routes can be along sort of like roads or like really established trails, kind of easier to traverse. But we are in the Sky Islands, and some of these routes are over uneven terrain, sometimes up like old mining roads that now sort of operate as trails or sort of a little bit more wild trails. But they can definitely be sort of an all sort of half day commitment where you have to be on your route really early in the morning and then, sort of going till, sort of late morning. And then you can maybe not be out by midday. Some of these areas like the Huachcuas and Chiricahuas, like we're doing this weekend, are pretty far from Tucson, very far from Phoenix. So we have to sort of plan accordingly for that. Now, I know many of you already know that, but just saying. And on the page here, if you get towards the bottom, I do have separate pages for the results for each year. If you're curious and you wanted to look at that, they are here for you, for anyone to look at. And I started doing this in 2017. So every year I just add a new page with the new year's results. So this has been building over time. So last year's is here all the way down to 2017, just so you know if you're interested in it. And we'll do that again for 2025. So anyway, and I sort of shared this information about what you're getting into when anyone who signed up for the survey. So just so everybody knows. So for the specific pages, for the Huachucas page, I do have a protocol, instructions, and a data form, which we'll look at here in a moment. But just sort of a protocol overview. The basic idea is to start surveying your assigned area at 6 a.m. or earlier if possible. Now it does say here 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. You do not have to go all the way to 11 a.m. You really don't. This is sort of the protocol as from the past is sort of like, yeah, if it's getting hot and it may be quite warm this weekend, you do not have to go all the way to 11. Please don't be a hero and try to, even though the protocol says 11. If you want to start earlier than 6, that is great. Okay, so we say 6 is sort of like a goal time. If you start a little later than that, that's totally okay. Don't stress. Don't worry about that. If it's taking a while to get out there or something, do not stress about that. But the main hope and goal is to try to get there by 6. You can start earlier. That definitely will increase your chances of getting trogons. They sort of can start at first light calling. If you want to start earlier and then end earlier, that's fantastic. If you want to, if you start at 6 and you feel like you've done through your whole area and it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock, go ahead and wrap it up. Just wrap it up and get out of there. I don't want people out in the heat getting, stressed by the heat if possible. everyone's safety is always my number one concern, and I'm pretty sure the protocol even like gets into that about safety. Yeah, there's a whole section on safety. So yes, safety, bring enough drink, bring enough like sports drinks or water, bring enough food, some snacks, lunch type thing with you. Um, be careful, watch your step. So safety is always my number one concern. But if you want to start before 6, that's great. So it talks about methodology and it talks about calls in the protocol. And we're going to talk about calls specifically. And in a moment here, I have some files to play for you. But basically, you're just going to sort of survey through your area, bird it carefully, looking and listening for trogons. In the Huachcuas, if you're not on the fort, there are no restrictions on using playback. So if you want to occasionally play a Trogon call to try to, if you're in like particularly good habitat or you thought you heard one, go ahead and play a Trogon call because that can sometimes stimulate them into calling back and sort of revealing themselves, if you will. But especially this time of year, this can work well. But the fort does restrict playback. So don't do it on the fort, but other parts of the Huachcuas. And I think maybe Ramsey doesn't like it. I don't know if they be very careful. If there's birders around you, if you're in a heavily birded area, maybe don't do it with if there's birders because then they're going to hear Trogon and come running. But if you're sort of off by yourself in an area, not on the fort in the Huachcuas, go ahead. In the Chiricahuas, it is not allowed within South Fork, so don't do it in there. But other parts of the Chiricahuas, again, if birders aren't near you, go ahead and do some playback if you would like. I do not require it or anything. And then you start bird through your area looking for trogons. It gets a little different in the Chiricahuas where we have this a little bit slightly protocol difference, but we're going to relax that a little bit this year as we did last year, which I'll talk about. And then your results, when you're out of your area, I do ask that people text me and let me know that you're safe. And this could be in the afternoon or whatever, but just let me know that you're safe and back at your vehicle. I will include that information again in the final sort of email I'm going to send with this recording with the phone number, asking you to go ahead and do that. And then when you're all done, you're going to do the data entry online, which we'll also talk about in a moment. But I do want to show a data form real quick here. So this is our data form. Gosh, my internet's. I linked to the good internet. Okay, so this is what the data form looks like. And it's pretty straightforward. This is a data form that you can download and print. If you don't have a printer or access to that, what it's asking for is pretty simple and honestly could be kept track of like in a notebook type thing. So it's just sort of who was there, what territory you did, date. And then every time you encounter trogons, we need counters to record the time that they encountered them. And that can be a range. It can be a range of times like 8 a.m. to 8:20 a.m. or whatever. It can be a range. And if you know the sex of the Trogon, is it a male? Is it a female? Is it a juvenile? Is it unknown? If you can tell. If you're hearing a Trogon at a distance, it's almost certainly a male. The coin call is usually given by males, but females do sometimes call. It's pretty rare, but they do sometimes call. But if you hear one calling, it's like 90% certain it's a male. But so then the coordinates of where you detected the Trogon, and then any notes of behavior. The uh, data form did always have a checklist on the back of likely species. This is so rarely used these days. eBird's gotten so good that I would just suggest people keep an eBird list. If you don't like eBird or something, you can go ahead and use this checklist if you want to.
The thing for with the count we're gonna do. For the what? The
Oh,
count
hang
we're
on.
gonna do, the
All
bird
right.
count.
Whoever's
Oh.
talking, go ahead and mute yourself. Uh, can I do it? I might be able to do it. Okay, here we go. Hit the wrong thing. Okay. Um, all right. Oh, good. This is actually better. I can see everything now. Okay, sorry. Okay, so can everyone still see my screen okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Ashley. I was just thinking, I just muted you all and then I asked a question. Okay. So this is what you just need to document. So just keep an eBird list if you like, and doing the extra species is optional, but I do suggest it because I'm going to start looking at how this compares to low trogon years too. Like on low trogon years, are other species missing? That kind of thing. So if you are able to, I would appreciate if you do keep an eBird list or do this checklist. Okay, so that's the basic data form, and this is the main thing that needs to be recorded for both surveys is coordinates. If you know the sex of the Trogon, or if it's a pair, the time, and it's just any behavior. So, oh, it was flying around or whatever, any sort of behavior that you notice. Okay, so that's the sort of the tour of the data form and the protocols. Now for the Huachcuas one here, I do have some map images that are uploaded. This was done with permission of the map maker, but this is the a really good trail map. So if your route is on a trail, this is a really nice trail map. And it also talks about entering your data here on the online survey, which I think I need to update that link. I think that's last year's. I'll fix that though after the meeting. And it also has here, I scanned years ago the Finding Birds in Southeast Arizona section on the Huachcuas. Just if you're curious, it's in there, and that's the book that's self-published by Tucson Audubon. This will be updated to be the new meeting, the one we're having right now, will be, but last year's video is there at the moment. And then I have this map, go away thing. Okay. I have this map of all the routes, and I have that open. So we'll look at that real quick for the Huachcuas. So this is, oh, I was zooming in looking at something. This is our routes. So the document, which was shared with you all, showing the names of who's assigned to what route, corresponds to this map. All right, and I'll include that again in my follow-up message with this recording. But the lines are like a little bit approximate. I do the best I can trying to draw them, trying to match the trails, but they sort of are meant to give you a basic idea of where they start and stop. Okay. And then of course, like follow the trail itself or the road itself. Some of these I could probably improve. That line looks a little lame in Upper Ramsey, but so this is they correspond to what we're talking about in that document of who's going where. So if anyone is interested in moving to a west side route, let me know. If not, I have a backup plan. So don't worry. I don't want anyone to stress on that because doing the west side routes, which can be excellent. I do one here on the west side every year. I do this Lone Canyon route, but they can be very good. The problem, it's not a problem. The thing is, if you're coming from Tucson or similar, you do sort of need to camp out the night before because you're coming over here via sort of the lake, the 83, and then this Montezuma's Pass road, which can be it's dirt road and it can be it's good road, but it can be a little bit slower. So it's too hard to get there in the morning unless you're coming from nearby. So this one does usually involve camping. We will be camping in this area, and if anyone wants to join, just let me know. So there will be sort of a group you can camp with. And I do have a few people coming back here to help with this. But if anyone wants to join us, let me know. But otherwise, I have a few people assigned here on the west side, but everyone else on the east side. And a very important logistics point that most birders are aware of is if you're doing one of the routes that is on the fort. So that would be any of the Garden Canyon routes or any of the Huachuca Canyon routes. Unless you are in the military and have a military pass, you will need to get a visitor's pass. They make this very feasible. You have to go to a specific gate. It's the Vandeman gate, sort of the most northern gate. Go in there, show them your ID, and they give you a little pass. And that's what lets you get through the security gate. So I do have teams assigned to, now many of them are very experienced and know this area. And I have a few that actually work for the fort that are going in. So that's no problem. But if you're assigned to Garden or Huachuca Canyon, and I'll actually follow up with each of those teams individually to make sure that they know that they have to get a pass. And if that's a problem, let me know and I can put you on a different route. Okay. So, but the fort routes are excellent. They're very good. They're usually some of the most likely canyons to have Trogons. Really, really good areas. Okay, so for the Chiricahuas, we also have a protocol and data form document. They look very similar. And then the team assignments, which I have already sent to that group. And I also, again, have a few maps here. I have some topo maps of the Chiricahuas that are scanned and uploaded up here as images, as well, again, as that section from the Finding Birds book. Just if you're curious and you want to see that and you don't have a copy of that book, it's scanned here for you. And same idea, I have the video. And then I have a link to the map, and I have that open already. So the Chiricahuas map is really east side centric. Now, most people who help with this survey either live in Portal or are familiar with Portal, and but it's very Portal heavy survey, and that is generally where the Trogons usually are. And for both mountain ranges we're doing this weekend, there have been a fair amount of eBird reports. So I think we'll get some Trogons this weekend, and there have been some on South Fork. Now the sections in South Fork are smaller. Okay, the routes are smaller. This is one of the first surveys that was done back in the day, organized by Rick. And so these routes correspond to ones that were done traditionally back in like the 90s, back in the day. So they can be kind of little. So as a result, I have assigned some of you helping with Chiricahuas surveys have been assigned multiple territories. Now they're always adjacent. Okay. I assigned people some people like clusters of routes. Like I have one person doing these two, and then I have one person doing these two together. And it's usually involving one that's kind of pretty small with a bigger one. So you're going to be moving through the territory, the multiple routes throughout the morning, and they're not that big. So this is a very feasible thing to do. Um, and definitely increases your chances of getting some Trogons. So like this one's on South Fork, I have one team that before many times has done multiple routes here on the road in South Fork. But then once it's trail, I'm just doing one route per person because you have to walk in. But these ones along the road are kind of pretty easy to traverse, so we'll be doing several. And for the protocol on these for the Chiricahuas, where's my Chiricahuas page? Here we go. Okay. The data form um, can look a little different for the Chiricahuas, and the protocols is pretty much the same though. But because this is the one Chiricahuas was the one that was done in the past, the old protocol sort of lingers in where it talks about, and I'll just open it. It talks about staying in a specific area for a certain amount of time. So that's why the document talks about a midpoint and what that is, how that was always done in the past, and we'll do it to an extent, but in a more relaxed way this year, is you have a assigned midpoint and you stay on that midpoint for the protocol says between 6 and 9. We've changed this for the Santa Ritas too. So anyone who's up with the Santa Ritas is aware of this change where so it talks about here staying in an area from 6 to 9 at the midpoint. So I think staying at the middle of a route for 3 hours is a lot. So what we're going to be doing is I want people to sort of move through their sections not too fast, but if you're doing just one route, this doesn't necessarily apply to people who are doing multiple routes on Sunday. Go ahead and sort of move through your route more like we did would in the Huachcuas, where you're sort of just birding through an area, moving slowly and stopping occasionally. But for those doing just one section, think of it as more like a series of midpoints. Okay. So you can not just go to the midpoint and stay there for 3 hours, but do a series, whatever habitat looks best to you. Use your own best judgment, but move through the area. Maybe, maybe the first a big good patch of habitat, spend 20 minutes there, 30 minutes or more, and then move to the next good spot, spend some time there listening. Um, so not just one midpoint, but sort of, I think maybe a little more interesting, fun way to do it is just do a series of sort of stops along your route. And then after 9, um, go ahead and go anywhere you want, back and forth. If you thought you had one further back or whatever, you thought you heard one, go back there. You can do, it's very free form according to the protocol. We've always done it this way. After 9, you can do anything you want. And after anywhere from 10 to 11, just go ahead and end that survey. Or even if it's getting really hot, even 9:30 if it's getting really hot. Because the most productive times for sure is um, earlier. Earlier in the morning is when they call more, it's when they're more obvious. And let me also open this data form. The data form looks a little different because this is meant for that midpoint idea where people stay in one spot. So the idea here is that you are logging the times that you're hearing a bird. So if you're doing one of the routes where you're staying on a midpoint for a long time, that's what this is for is oh, I heard the birds this time and they were up canyon or down canyon. I suggest that people just do if you're using a notebook or something, what I really need is coordinates. The one that we showed for the Huachcuas is a better data form. And in fact, I'm going to update this to include the page to include that data form. I prefer that one where people have the this one here, where people are just recording the time, the sex information, and then UTMs or coordinates. It can be decimal degrees as well. I need to update that as well. Any sort of the coordinates, the ones that Google Maps uses, decimal degrees is great, or the metric UTMs one is great, and then your notes. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make a change on that page to include this data form as well, because I think that's an easier one to use. And if you're doing it in a notebook or something, or just on a piece of paper, that's a much easier set of information to handle. Okay, and what we're actually getting at is where are these birds? Okay, so that's the sort of survey logistics, and all the data forms are here on this site if you want to download them. And another thing I share on the general Trogon page, back, not the one, now we're out of the ones that were specific to the Huachcuas and Chiricahuas, but this more general one about the surveys is some information about Trogons themselves. So let's talk about that. So one of the first things I have here in Surveyor Resources is this PDF image or of a scan from a book, and it's this book here, written by Rick Taylor. It's the Trogons, let's say Trogons of the Arizona Borderlands. This book here, it's out of print, and if you ever see it in a used book table for birding books, I recommend you grab it because it's actually very good. And it has some really good information. It's really interesting read, but it's out of print. So because of that, because it's out of print, Rick went ahead and provided permission to scan it. So let me just show it to you all. It's a fun little book. And it talks about, and if you're just interested in some of the backstory on Trogons, this is a really good thing to look at. Are you okay, internet? Like, okay. So it's a scan of some pages here, and it just talks about the different calls and what they mean in turn in Rick's experience. And one of the most important things to note is that these coink and the sort of call is the one that most birders are familiar with. That's the goink, 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 the really loud call. And that you can think of almost as like singing in most birds, like a territorial male call. But this cow call is much quieter. And I'm going to play examples of both of these. It's a much quieter call, and it tends to, it's like cha 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 cha. It's a much quieter call, and it more indicates that you're dealing with a pair of trogons. It's a much softer call. When you hear it, the trogon is closer than you may think. And it also is telling you that this is almost certainly a pair. Now, not 100%, unfortunately. I have seen two males do this at each other when I think they were just having a discussion. So you can think of it as almost like a contact call. That's how I have, in my experience, that's really what it seems like. 90% of the time it's a pair. Sometimes it might be two males talking. Whenever I've had that happen, though, it's pretty obvious because you usually see them both. And it always seems to me when I have this happen that maybe they're discussing whose territory ends where and where mine begins kind of discussion in a non-aggressive way, in a communicative way. But usually it indicates a pair. And then and then it goes to talk about the Wikiki call, which is like a flight call, which they sometimes do, which then can then merge into a alarm call. And again, that has to do with the tone and how emphatic it sounds and how panicked it sounds, is whether or not it's a alarm call. So we're gonna play those good examples of those three. This is not what I want. Okay, it got away from my page. All right. So we're going to play examples. Okay, so here is the coink call that carries the furthest. That is sort of the first calls usually on any of the Bird ID apps. So it's a pretty distinctive call. It's usually those 5 to 6 sort of barking calls with a pause. That gap is an important part of the call, and then several seconds long, and then they go again. So that's the really territorial call, kind of like singing. It can carry quite far. And the other, what we call the cow call, is this one, and it's much softer. Okay, so that's much softer. It doesn't carry nearly as far, although you can hear it. You can hear it from 100 yards away, 50. Well, I don't even know, but probably not 100 yards, 50 yards away. You can hear it. Um, It's much softer and it's more of a contact call. So that almost, oh, like I would just go ahead and assume you have a pair this year if you're hearing that um that kind of call. It's much softer and definitely I think this year let's just go with it being a pair. Now you do sometimes have females call. Now when females call, it is much less frequently. I have barely ever heard. I have heard it a few times in all these years of doing surveys, but you don't hear the females call that much for sure. And when they do, if you're like, oh my God, is that a Trogon? Because it sounds like an octave lower than what I'm used to hearing, that's a female. The females call at a much lower pitch than the males. They usually call for a much more limited amount of time, like a much shorter call. I've heard them do coink, 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 and it's very, very deep. It sounds like a baritone trogon. If you hear that, it's probably a female. I haven't heard it much, but you do hear it. And weirdly, I've been checking the eBird. Some of the sightings people have been having over the last few weeks have been females. So there are some around. So just be aware of that. If you're like, if you think to yourself, oh my God, is that a trogon? It's so deep, it could be a female. Okay. And we're going to talk about what those look like here in a moment. But the alarm call sounds like this. I'm not even sure I called it an alarm call. So I've heard them do this. And this is what sounds like this. And it's, again, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's maybe more of a communication call as well. But when they do this, where it gets then really, really panicked at the end, that's an alarm call. But it sounds a lot like this. So if you hear this chattering, I just want everyone to be aware of this because I did hear Trogons doing this. Where was I? I was in Garden Canyon a few weeks ago on the fort, and I heard a Trogon doing this. It's like chattering. It sounds kind of different from their other calls. I don't think it's an alarm call. It doesn't sound that fraught. Sometimes it can sound very fraught. Okay, so that's another type of contact call that I want people to be familiar with because it was kind of usually hit in the winter. When you get the occasional winter sometimes, it's the sound they do. But I did hear it in early May. Well, not even early May, whenever Southwest Wings was a few weeks ago in the Sierra Vista area. Okay. So another thing I just want to point out is if you want these calls, these are all fine to have and to use. They're from either Canto or AZFO, and they're fine to use if not for profit. You can actually on these links, you can right click and use the save link as option, and it goes to save it as an MP4. So you can actually download these if you would like to, just so you know. But the apps have pretty good calls, and I've noticed they've updated on the Merlin. The calls they have on there are really very good as well. So while we're talking about Trogons and what they sound like and all that and what they look like, let's just go over this real quick. So I do have the calls here, and so this is what Cornell has up on their site, which I have linked to on the main Trogon page. I have this thing here about identification tips on how to find elegant Trogon, blah, 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 from Cornell can be found here. And that goes to this page, and it's a very good page. In fact, actually, let me go back to the main part of the page. I jumped to sounds for our meeting, but the main part of the page that the website lands on is very good, and it talks about Trogons here, and it has some really good photos actually to showcase Trogons and a little bit about just the way they sit and they behave. And it can be very helpful to understand this for the survey, where you have, and they are medium sized. I like their description, medium sized, stocky, pot-bellied birds. So they are stocky. They're pretty large. They're Mexican Jay sized, a little bit bigger, maybe longer tail. But body size, I would say, is similar to something like a Mexican Jay, where and the way they sit is really interesting. So this is pretty typical. They have this real hunched back appearance to me, like the photo behind me. They have this kind of hunched back appearance. They're kind of an odd shape for a bird. This is a bird of the tropics that's here in Arizona, basically. They have this long tail that hangs down, and they often will sit like this, where the tail is kind of going straight down, is black and white barred on the underside, and then colored on the back, usually green or coppery in both, I believe. and male and female. But this is pretty typical how they sit. The feet are kind of higher up on the body than usual with birds. So they have this way of sitting where it's like their feet are more towards like the middle of their body. It's a really distinctive look when they're sitting there. Um, and they're kind of big bodied, long tailed. They have zygodactyl feet, so that's two forward and two back, like a roadrunner. So they have this like parrot way of sitting, kind of, that's pretty distinctive. So these are all males in this photo. So this is red belly, white chest stripe, green on the head and back, gray in the wings. So the wing coverts are gray. And then the black and white striped tail on the underside. When they're facing you, you can sometimes see that, like in this photo. But female looks quite different, and this is a good photo of a female. She's got brown and gray mostly. She's not green on the back. She's brown on the back, like her head. And she's got a gray upper chest and then a pink lower belly. Same sort of tail, though, the black and white striped tail. She's the same size and shape as the male. She's not small or anything. She's the same size and shape. She's got this white teardrop stripe coming down from her eye. Super cute. I like the females. And if you see a female, you see them so much more rarely than the males. Like, I always relish the chance to see a female because they're just so much more demure and sort of less obvious. So the male here, here's another good photo of a male. He's got the coppery tail, which is what this subspecies, all the coppery tail, if you see that in any of the apps, coppery tailed is the one we have in subspecies. We have in southern Arizona, and then the other one, the elegant subspecies, is the one to the south and more like South Mexico. So ours have this lovely coppery tail, the male and female both have copper on the tail, on the back of the tail, and but the male has green and the female has a non-shiny brown back. So they're really cool looking birds. And so let's go to sounds. They all have that yellow bill too, male and female both, like in the logo over here. So here's a cool video of Trogon. I do want to just play a little bit of it because it's a good example too of that contact call, that cha-cha-cha-cha-cha kind of call. And you'll see this bird is super relaxed, preening, giving that call, almost certainly talking to his female that he's over here and that he's fine. Okay, so I'll just play this briefly. Okay, get rid of that. Ow, stop it. Go away. Donate now. Okay. Okay. Um, so that's a good video. So that's linked to if you guys want to watch it. But let me play it. I like their three songs and calls listed. So we're gonna play those real quick too for the coppery tailed, which is our subspecies. So here we go. I like how different that sounds than the one I had embedded, and the ones on Merlin sound a little bit different too, because there is a fair amount of variation. I have heard different males coink slightly differently from each other, slightly different tones. I don't know if it's like an accent thing or what, but they don't always sound exactly like the one I played. The main thing to keep in mind is the cadence and sort of like the tone can vary a little bit, but the fact it's always like coink, 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 pause, 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 coink, 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 that seems to be pretty uniform, but the tone they're using can vary a little bit among individuals. So I like playing that one too because it does sound a little different than the one I played before. Here's another one. So that's the contact call, the more sort of muttering, cha-cha-cha-cha-cha kind of call. So if you want to record that on a data form, I would just call that contact call, okay? Because it's just this, Rick always will call it the cow call, K-O-W, cow call. Whereas this first one's the coink call with a Q, coink. Okay, that's that contact call. That's much quieter than the other one. So here's then, I think this might be an alarm call. Let's see. Chattering. The way that ended in kind of a frantic way, that I think of as more as of a contact call. The one I played earlier, where it's just like doing the chattering, I've heard them do that, and they don't end in that sort of frantic last like this. It's got this sort of frantic tone to it That's an actual alarm call. If you hear that on any of like, and this is maybe more applicable in other years, but I have heard them do that when people are sort of accidentally getting really near a nest. Okay. Or sometimes fledglings if you hear that in the summer. So, that is more of an alarm call. If you hear an alarm call, it's best practice to back off, even if you're not sure exactly where the heck this bird is. Just go back the way you just came from a little bit, back off. You don't have to leave the area entirely, but give them some space, back off, be quiet, and still watch them because they might then reveal a nesting location or something to you. But they're giving that call because they're upset, they're uncomfortable. Just go ahead and back off, give them some space. Okay, so that's best practice for that. But generally, I think this page is really good talking about trogons. If you're not super familiar with them, I do suggest you go through it. It does have this thing at the bottom here about the four, keys to ID, and this is definitely like not necessary to go through if you've seen trogons or experienced with trogons, but it's good. It goes into it and talks about habitat and things like that, and sort of just get it, just make sure you're really acquainted with the way they sit and everything and the way that they tend to move. You would think this bird has a bright red belly and a shiny green back. I'll be able to see this bird. And they are so good at hiding and camouflaging themselves. They do tend to turn that green back to you, or the female, the brown back to you when they think someone might be looking at them, which can make them disappear pretty quickly. They also have this habit of staying still for quite a long time. These are not birds that move around a lot, it's not like a kinglet feeding. Now, I have seen trogons be quite active, especially if they're hunting, but I don't know, like I feel like they have a bit of a spidey sense when they know you're looking at them. They can sit very still for minutes at a time, barely moving, and then suddenly you'll hear them call or something. Another weird thing I feel, I've never seen this written or anything, but in my experience, trogons have this ability to fly very quietly. For a bird this size, their wings make a like no sound. I don't know how they do it, like owls. Because like when a Mexican jay flies in, you hear the air movement as they fly in. When trogons fly in, I don't ever hear any wing sound. They're very quiet flyers, and they're able to move around quite a lot without drawing a lot of attention. And they also will sit in the mid-story. They sometimes sit high up, especially if the male is like calling and he's upset because you've been doing playback or something. I have seen them sit at the top of a tree and like coink, 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 call. But often they sit on branches smaller than you would think that could hold their weight because they don't weigh as much as they look like they do. And they will sit in pretty dense vegetation. And you got to kind of like go left to right to get a window into where they're sitting to get a view of them. Anyone who's been bird watching and looking for trogons has probably experienced this, but they are tricky to see. They're much easier to hear. So if you hear them and you never get a look at them, that is no problem for the survey. I know that may not be that's not a birder's preference, but for the survey, hearing them and getting a good beat on where they are by hearing them is totally fine. That's fine for our data. But if you want to see them, or just in general to see them, sometimes you do have to sort of go left, right, kind of squat up and down because they can sit kind of in dense stuff. And if you give them some time, they usually will sort of move, especially if you're in an area that allows some playback. So just a little judicious use of playback can help you confirm that they're in there and that whether or not they're male or female. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to cover, and then we'll open the floor for questions, is data entry. Okay, so when you are finished with your survey and you have sent me a text message so that I know you're safe and you're back at your vehicle or that you're heading back home, especially in the Huachcuas, well, Chiricahuas too, signal can be very poor. So just when you have signal, just let me know that you're safe and that you're back. But then later, it does not have to be the same day, but in the next day or two, and I will again send the link out for this, is your data entry survey. So I try to keep this as easy as possible for people. But you just have to put in your email, your name, some information about you. And then I ask some stuff about like how far you drove and stuff. And that's for our grant. That's for our grant reporting is why I asked that. So it is a pretty important question. And then if you did an eBird list, you share the link there. You also will share your eBird list with this username. And I will say this again in an email, but AZIBA survey is the username of our eBird account for the Arizona IBA program. So you can share it with that username. And then I asked right off the bat, how many Trogons did you have? And if it's zero, put zero. And it is a very important, valid answer, which I explained here. But and then any survey comments, and this could be stuff like, oh, there was water here, or oh, I saw coatis, or whatever, anything about the general survey morning. And surveys about trogons, there will be another place to put that. But this is just about the survey morning. Did you, now it asked this again, and this is just for a logistics thing for Google Forms. Did you have trogons on the survey? If you say no, then that's it. The survey's over. You don't have to do anything else. Well, after you hit next, it submits the survey if you hit no. But if you say yes, what it does when you hit next, oh, geez, put in a fake name because I'm just trying to show you guys. You hit next. God. Okay. Tried to do this ahead of time to prevent that. All right. All right. I'm gonna say 0. Hit next. Okay. But I said yes. So if you hit yes, what it does is it triggers the form to understand that you need that to go to a new page, which will then ask you for information about a Trogon sighting. You are going to do each of these. You're going to do each encounter with Trogons, not encounter, each territory of Trogons. There we go. If you had a pair, if you had a male right here, um, let's say you had a male towards the start of your route and then a separate pair towards the end of your route or something. Each of those different territories are going to get their own page here. So you do one. So it's Elegant Trogon Details #1. So if like for the first encounter, first territory you came across. Now you may have heard them more than once, and that's fine. That all goes in here. So what was it? Okay, it was a pair, a lone male, lone female, lone subadult, okay, or other. The time of your observations. So this is where you put in all the specific information about a Trogon sighting. So it's time, the coordinates. Um, Now I do this because it's Google Forms can be so weird. There's an X and a Y. So if you have coordinates, you put the first set of numbers here and then the second on the next one. Okay. It's just because then it goes into a spreadsheet that way. All right. So then any notes? And do you have another pair? If you say yes, it'll take you to a duplicate of this page where you can then put in information about your next Trogon you need to report. Or if you hit no, that pretty much ends the survey. So this has gone really well the last few years since we added this online data entry component, but this has gone really well, and I think it's Google Maps is good. It's pretty easy, I think, to move through it and do the data entry. Um, I also forgot to show it, but we also have a Google album that I'm going to share with all of you today that I'll give you access to it, and that's where people can put. Let me see if I can just open it real quick. Where you can put your photos. If you take fun photos of trogons or of other critters or flowers or scenery or selfies of you guys doing the survey, you can go ahead if you would like and add them to this album. And I think that's super fun. We started doing this the last few years, and I think it's a really fun way to share photos with others, or just then you can check it out and see what other people had. It's just, I think it's really fun and kind of helps sort of bring all the various surveys together in a way where the people who help, I get such different groups of people helping with the 5 different surveys because they are so sort of spread apart. They go all the way from west of Nogales to almost to New Mexico and the Chiricahuas. It's such a big footprint, and with such different sort of like groups of people based out of different cities helping with the survey, that I really think this helps kind of bring it together. Some cool photos of like red starts and people doing the survey and scenery and flowers, and just want to give you guys a sense of what others have been doing. And it's really fun. So if you try to remember to take photos if you're one of those people. I like to always try to remember to do a selfie on a survey. And then I'll share permissions with you so you guys can add to this and view it as well. So okay, let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing. And if you have a question, so let's first start with questions about logistics. If you have a question about like what time we start or that kind of thing, let's do those first, and then we'll do route specific stuff off video. So does anybody have any questions about the general survey? Okay, is there a chat? Okay, good. No one's putting anything in the chat. Okay, I'm not missing anything. That's the problem when I'm like solo piloting. I'm like, is anything happening that I can't see? Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna do sort of a closing statement, then we'll end the recording. But generally, the basic idea is, I want to make sure everyone knows their route assignment. I want to make sure everyone knows what they're doing. And if anyone doesn't want to ask a question or is watching the video of this, go ahead and text me or give me a call, or I'll be checking my email frequently. I will be out of signal starting Friday because I have to camp for my Saturday survey in the west side of the Huachcuas. I will be out of signal probably starting around 3 to 4 p.m. to be safe. You might get me after that, but just to be safe, let's say 4 p.m. Sort of call me before 4 if you're having any sort of issue, and we can sort it out. But on my cell number, which I'll share with everybody. But yeah, so you try to be on your route by 6 a.m. or earlier. And okay, I have a good question here, which I will address in a moment. Can you play the male and female calls together to know the difference? You know what's funny, Norma, is I cannot been able to find a recording of a female call. I think they do it so rarely that no one's got anything recording when they do it. I've only heard it like twice in all these years, a female call. I don't have a female call recording, but the description, which matches what I heard in the field, is just a much lower pitch where he's like, coink, 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 and she'd be like, coink, 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 coink. It's head swivelingly lower pitch. Like, oh my gosh, what was that? It's that much lower. Um, yeah, so unfortunately, I'm recording. So if anyone gets one or knows of one, please send it my way. But I don't have access to one, and I've looked too. So that's a really good question that I've asked myself in the past. Um, okay, so I also have so the basic idea is to be on your route by 6-ish. Don't stress if it's later, but it's certainly more comfortable for you if you can get there at 6 or even earlier if you're up for that. And if it gets my main concern is safety of your safety. So if it gets too warm or too hot or you're feeling tired, please go ahead and turn around. That's more important to me than trying to reach, the end point of the route. But just sort of survey your route, and if it gets to be 9:30, 10 a.m. and you're done, go ahead and just call an end to that survey. You do not have to go all the way to 11, even though the protocol from the past says that. Okay, so I have a question here about the Fort Huachuca. This is for the Huachuca Mountains survey. So it says here, so Ben, you say here, last year I ended up going to Buffalo Soldier Gate the night before to get the military pass. I did not know you can get a pass at the main gate, as many people call it, the one off of Fry, the one that sort of parallels Fry. Um, I've always gone to the Vandeman gate, and that's the one where the 90 does its turn. It's like sharp turn into Sierra Vista. Kind of the gate that's a little bit north of the main gate near Fry Boulevard. If anyone does not know Sierra Vista, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you know Sierra Vista, you know what I'm talking about. I've always gone to the Vandeman. So if it worked for you to go to Buffalo Soldier Gate to get your pass, that's totally fine. It's just in my experience dealing with Southwest Wings and all that, we've always gone to Vandeman because they have a little parking area right before the gate there, the one off of the Vandeman gate. They have a little parking area and you can walk into sort of a portable building they have, and they have a person in there who behind almost like it looks like a little DMV or something. And you go in there and show them your information and they can get you a pass. Can we enter a Merlin recording in the results? A Merlin recording. You mean like like an audio recording? Oh, I see what you're saying. I think I get what you're saying, Norma. If Merlin is calling a bird, if Merlin says, "I'm hearing this," can you put that in the results? Um, I do generally think Merlin's gotten quite good. So if it passes the smell test with you, if you're like, okay, Merlin's saying Trogon, I agree, that's a Trogon, go ahead and put that in. If Merlin says something crazy, which it can do sometimes, um, then maybe don't include it unless you feel like it makes sense to you and that you can verify it. Okay, so that's sort of the idea. I think Merlin is a really good tool. I think it's especially good for more common birds. If you're like, oh, that's what a Cordilleran, okay, it's saying Cordilleran flycatcher. That makes sense for this location and this time. And yeah, okay, I guess that is a Cordilleran. Go ahead and put it in. That's a really good question. Thank you, Norma. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but I'm not going anywhere.